I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Keith. At this time, we will now hear from Elijah Clark as he sings the national anthem. If you'd like to remain standing, thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, oh, the ramparts we once were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in there, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, Elijah, also known as Eli. That was beautiful. I don't know about you, I can't sing, let alone without help, so a cappella singers always amaze me. We're going to just play a short video for you, and after that, we'll go from there. So please watch the screens. You guys didn't know this was an OSHA conference?
For Latinos, the American dream is within reach, but real and tough barriers continue to prevent us from reaching our full potential. The time has come to start talking about solutions. Join the conversation at Soluciones con Libre. The Libre Initiative, a group committed to empowering the Latino community, invites leading experts and community leaders to dialogue about the most pressing issues facing our country, from healthcare, education, to jobs, the economy, and immigration. Our community is looking for answers, together at Soluciones con Libre. For more information, go to solucionesconlibre.com.
Thank you for our awesome tech support and my great colleague, Quincy, over here. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to turn over the mic to our official MC for the night. And at this time, I'd like to invite Mayra Molina to come up to the stage. I want to give special thanks to her for agreeing to do this and let you know that she's partnered with us in making this event possible. Mayra works with the Alianza Venezolana de Utah, or the Venezuelan Alliance of Utah, which helps bridge the gap for Venezuelan people and getting the resources they need with the authorities and organizations that will help best serve them. And so with that, we'll now turn the mic over to our official MC, Mayra Molina. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to everyone. Thank you for honoring me tonight, to be part and representing my Latino community in Utah. For me, it's an honor to be here tonight, and I would like just to thank everyone who was involved in putting this together. We are so happy to see many faces and to finally get a voice from our community, so we can work together in getting solutions and growing in this beautiful state of Utah. Okay, so thank you, Heidi, for that introduction. I'm so happy to work with you guys as well. We're gonna go, based on the program, we're gonna have Daniel Garza, and so Daniel Garza is gonna be one of our speakers. He was born in the Central Valley of California and will migrate with his family annually from their ancestral hometown in Garza in Nuevo León, Mexico, through California, Nebraska, and Washington State, following the crop season as farm workers until he was 19 years old. Daniel Garza began his public career in service as a congressional staff assistant for U.S. Congressman Richard Doug Hastings, and was later elected as a councilman at the city of Tompkins, Washington in 1996. In 2001, he was tapped by the George W. Bush administration to serve as Deputy Director of External and Intergovernmental Affairs in the Office of the Secretary of the Department of Interior, and was appointed in 2004 as Associate Director of the Office of Public Liaison in the White House. In 2007, Daniel joined Univision to host and co-produce Agenda Washington, a weekly Spanish language news talk show covering the issues impacting the U.S. Hispanic community. Mr. Garza was appointed to serve on the board of the Harvard Journal of Hispanic Policy in 2016, was designated as one of the Washington, D.C. influentials by the Congressional Quarterly magazine in 2018, and in 2019, Daniel was named as one of the 50 most influential voices in Washington, D.C. by the National Journal. Garza currently serves as president of the LIBRE Initiative and resides in Mission, Texas, with his wife and 3 children. So, Mr. Garza, thank you for joining us.
Appreciate very much being here in the Salt Lake area. I'm from McAllen, Texas, where I understand the senator actually did mission work. So bringing a little bit of McAllen to you, Senator. Just flew here today. My parents are from like I said, a small town near Monterrey, Nuevo León, and they saw America back in the 60s as the promised land. The country where you could achieve your dreams, where you could achieve what you could not achieve in your country of origin, really. Winnie Guthrie wrote a song about the Joad family from the Grapes of Wrath, written by John Steinbeck. In the stanza, it said, and they came to the mountaintop, and it looked like the promised land. There was a rich green valley with a river running through it. There was work for every single hand, they thought. There was work for every single hand. And in a very real way, that's how my parents saw America. Opportunity. They could improve their life and the life of their family, change their station. This country has received waves and waves of poor immigrants, millions of poor immigrants, who have risen up and done well, who have achieved their own dreams and their own aspirations, not the aspirations of a politician, their own aspirations and their own dreams. They've achieved wealth for themselves like in no other country in the history of the world, and have generated wealth for other people and generated opportunity for other people. That is the America where my senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, likes to say, this is the nation where anybody from anywhere with nothing can achieve anything. And the reason we're able to do that is because of our economic system. It's because of our free market system. that where people are free to innovate, to emprender negocio, to be entrepreneurs, right? To realize their full potential. Because people are capable of extraordinary things, and if government would just get out of the way, just watch them go, right? And so, why Libre? Growing up, I grew up a farm worker. I was born in California. My parents picked grapes in California, then they moved to the Yakima Valley where they picked apples, pears, peaches, cherries, everything under the sun. And then in the panhandle of Nebraska, we hold sugar beets in Stracke. That was our life up until I was 19 years of age. It was a rough life. Actually, I never finished high school. At 17, I had to drop out of high school because of the work that I did. And a public school system just kind of spit me out. It couldn't accommodate for somebody with my kind of lifestyle, which is why I'm such a big believer in school choice and educational vouchers, and we'll be talking about that in a little bit. A GED got me back on track. Started making the right decisions. So while at 17, I was a high school dropout with no prospects of a professional career. 17 years later, I was working at the White House with George W. Bush. That's the country that we live in. It's a country of second chances. And the LIBRE Initiative exists because we need to defend our constitution and our free market system that allows for those kind of second chances. If we lose it, the senator and I were talking about what's our backup country to go to. There's nowhere else. This is it. Texas. Texas, right? So I'm gonna end by saying this. Latinos need a prosperous America. They need a free America. America needs a prosperous Latino community and a free Latino community. We need a free country with free people in a free market. That's what we fight for every day. So I look forward to the panel discussion. We have some incredible guests that are with us. Thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you for those words. As an immigrant myself, I always said to be here in the United States is a privilege, and a few of us understand. So don't take it for granted. Fight for this country like your own. We can be anything. Thank you. We proceed with the program, so now we're going to read the bio of Mr. Mikey. Right? Mike learned his love for the Constitution around the family dinner table. Mike's father, Rex Lee, served as Solicitor General under President Ronald Reagan and later as President of Brigham Young University. As a child, Mike attended his father's arguments before the U.S. Supreme Court, giving him a unique understanding of the government from an early age. As an attorney, he developed a more complete understanding of why the Constitution is essential to the protection of life, liberty, and property. After graduating from the law school in 1997, he served as a law clerk to Judge D. Benson of the U.S. District Court of the District of Utah. He then clerked for Judge Samuel Alito Jr., who was serving at the time on the U.S. Court of Appeals and the Third Circuit Court in Newark, New Jersey. After his second clerkship, he joined the Washington, D.C. office of Sidley and Austin, where he specialized in appeal and Supreme Court litigation. Several years later, Mike was invited to serve as an assistant U.S. attorney in Salt Lake City, preparing briefs and arguing cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit. He served as a governor Huntsman's in general counsel and then went to Washington for 1 year clerkship with Justice Alito and the U.S. Supreme Court. Following his clerkship, Mike joined the Salt Lake office of Washington, D.C., a based law firm of Horry LLP,
Mike has earned a reputation of a outstanding lawyer based on his sound judgment, reading and coloring advocacy skills, and through an understanding of the Constitution. Mike and Sharon have 3 children, and they live in Provo, Utah. Ladies and gentlemen, who's with us tonight, Senator Mike.
That doesn't happen very often, so thank you. I love this crowd already. Really is such a pleasure to be with you tonight. And I've got my wife Sharon here with me, and as we were getting ready to leave tonight, Sharon said to me, I'm not sure we can leave our dog at home because we left her all day and we got to bring her, so I've got to either stay with her or come in. And I said, well, we'll bring both of you then. So Sharon's here, and so is Penny. Show them Penny. She's a very fierce dog. Descended from wolves, like all dogs. Sometimes people ask me, do you have a security detail? And I say, yes, it's Sharon. It works somehow. So I've known Daniel for quite a while and always really liked him, and just realized now that he lives not just in the area where I served as a missionary, but he lives in the very same town where I started my mission, in Mission. And I had a lot of fond memories of Mission. I became fluent in Spanish there. I had studied Spanish in school, and so I could conjugate verbs, I could read it and more or less understand it. Couldn't speak it worth a darn. Until I got to Mission, and I served in these neighborhoods where nobody spoke English, and so I'd go days after days without ever teaching anyone in English. In fact, the first time I tried as a missionary to teach the gospel to someone in English was an absolute disaster. That was when I knew that I was learning Spanish well. But there in Mission, Texas, you've got such a beautiful mixing of cultures and languages. They end up merging in an almost seamless way. I'm sure Daniel knows what I'm talking about there. There was this one house that we passed by frequently as missionaries, and it had a sign in front of it. Now this sign, had it been written in simple English, it would have said, beware of dog. Warning against a fierce attack dog like Penny. Had it been written in Spanish, it would have said, tenga cuidado con el perro. This one said neither. It said, guáchate con el dog. It reminds me of a story my late father, who's also an attorney, also spoke Spanish. He told the story of an apocryphal immigrant from Uruguay. He came to the United States, he wrote home to his family. And he said, his family had asked him, like learning English. And he said, more or less it went well. And he said, el inglés me confunde, ojos son eyes, eyes is hielo, hielo es amarillo, y amarillo es una ciudad en Texas. If you don't speak Spanish, I can't really translate that one. Just trust me, it's very funny. We, as a country, are strong because we're a nation of immigrants. We've taken people from so many different cultures and so many different parts of the world at different times. When people from their mother countries were looking for a place of freedom. In some cases, it was economic freedom. In other cases, it was religious freedom. More than not, it was both. And the thing is, freedom from economic oppression, racial adversity, and freedom from religious persecution. They're really all different parts of the same whole. Because they all strike not just at what we do as human beings, but who we are. That's why the United States is that shining city on a hill, or has the potential to become such, because of the promises made in our first founding document. We've got 2 of them. Our first founding document is the Declaration of Independence. That's the picture of who we are. That's the picture that lays out our vision as a country and has been since 1776, that recognizes the inherent dignity and eternal value of the immortal human soul. That all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that governments are constituted among men by the consent of the governed to protect those very same interests. And whenever government becomes destructive of those ends, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish that system of government so as to protect those same ends. It's that promise that's been bringing people to our shores and into our borders for centuries. And I hope and pray every day that it remains available for that very reason, for many centuries, if not millennia, to come. Because here's the reason. If it can't work here, it can't work anywhere. It must work here, because human beings deserve to have one place on earth where freedom actually survives, and that's here. So that's what our first founding document did. It established that vision. Our second founding document set in motion a sequence of events that would put guardrails around government, because the founding fathers understood that there's this paradox. On the one hand, you have to have government in place in order for life and liberty and property to be protected. But paradoxically, it is also government that has the greatest potential to undermine life and liberty and property, all conditions precedent for the pursuit of happiness. And so we put in these guardrails, saying we're not going to have a king, we're not going to have a Caesar, we're going to split up Caesar or king vertically and horizontally. We're going to slice him and dice him 19 different ways so that no one person and no one group of people can have too much power. And then we're going to impose affirmative limitations separate and apart from those slicing and dicing. You know, we had federal Caesar and state Caesar and local Caesar. And then we had legislative Caesar within the federal government and executive Caesar and judicial Caesar. Then on top of that, we put all kinds of affirmative limitations in place. You can't tell us how, who, when, whether, or what to worship. You can't, in fact, have a national church because that undermines the other objectives. You can't tell us what to say or not say, what to print or not print in our newspaper. You can't tell us we can't assemble. You can't mess with their right to bear arms. You can't subject us to unreasonable searches and seizures. You know the drill. So those affirmative thou shalt nots in the Bill of Rights, coupled with the structural protections, vertical and horizontal, within the Constitution, are what make it possible for us to protect life, liberty, and property through government, and not have it turn on life, liberty, or property. If we lose any one of those things, everything else crumbles. The Bill of Rights, as beautiful as it is, will crumble. It will be destroyed the minute we lose federalism or separation of powers, which always culminates in other things. As the late Justice Anthony Scalia used to say, any tin-horn dictator can have a Bill of Rights. And I've never understood what the difference between a tin-horn dictator is and a regular dictator. And Justice Scalia is now dead, so I can't ask him. But the point is simple. Lots of countries have bills of rights. In fact, many of the most oppressive government regimes on planet Earth have scintillating bills of rights that will, make the hair on the back of your neck stand up when you read them. But whether or not that means anything, whether that Bill of Rights is worth any more than the paper it's printed on, is entirely dependent on whether you have structural protections in place to guarantee against the excessive accumulation of power in the hands of a few. So the reason why I fight for secure borders, the reasons why I fight for economic liberty, for due process, for freedom from racial oppression, is inextricably intertwined with why I fight for religious freedom. These are all different manifestations of government run amok, of the consolidation of power. And that in turn is why I fight so hard for the much maligned, much neglected, and often forgotten structural protections of federalism and separation of powers. Without any of those things, all of our substantive affirmative thou shalt not protections fail. And they must not fail. Because if we fail here to protect liberty, it all crumbles. And the cause of liberty and the cause of protecting our fellow beings is lost. We're not going to let that happen. So, as why I'm thrilled to be here at an event sponsored by a number of worthy organizations that I love, including AFP, including FreedomWorks, including the Libre Initiative. It's fantastic, by the way, that I'm here at an event celebrating the Libre Initiative rather than the Cautivo Initiative. It's good to be entertained by the Truth Project with its famed lead singer Elijah, rather than the Falsehood and Lies Project with its lead singer Goliath. We're here because we understand that there is a difference between good and evil, between right and wrong, between truth and falsehood, and most importantly, between liberty and captivity. I choose liberty, I choose freedom, and I know you do too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Te queremos, Mike.
Senator, can you please come back? We chose liberty. Yes. What an awesome statement. So we are going to present with please Arturo. Okay, and then Congressman, please. John Cortez is here with us tonight. We would like to present you an award. The award name is the Defender of the Religious Freedom Award. So thank you for everything you do.
Big leader over here with me as well, and Lisa Shepherd, please. Lisa Shepherd is the secretary of the Utah Republican Latino Coalition, and Keith Cooder is my vice chair, so I appreciate their help and support. My name is Arturo Morales. I'm the chairman of the Utah Republican Latino Coalition. I want to take a moment to express my appreciation to Daniel Garza, president of the Libre Initiative, Janae Stracke, director of Grassroots at Heritage Action, Garrett, Bess, vice president of Heritage Action, and Noah Wall, vice president of FreedomWorks, for their unwavering support in sponsoring this event. Thank you very much. These three organizations have something in common. They all have a very robust Spanish outreach program. And they recognize the importance of educating, involving, and mobilizing this group of our society so we can get more involved and participate in the electoral process. I want to express my appreciation to Congressman John Curtis. He made a tremendous effort to be here with us today to share this special moment with Senator Lee, after all Congressman John Curtis is Senator Lee's congressman. Finally, one more thing, I want to recognize the presence of my predecessor, Chair of the Utah Republican Latino Coalition, Michael Clara. Can you please stand up, Michael? Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your leadership. You're a great example to me and for your support as well. Finally, I want to express my appreciation to all of you for being here with us tonight. This event could not happen without you. In December 2015, I identified a very alarming trend across the nation. Business owners, pastors, and individuals were being harassed, persecuted, ridiculed, removed from their jobs, and more. Because of their personal religious beliefs, they were under attack. America is rich in ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity, respecting the right of every person to worship how, where, and what they may, according to the dictates of their own conscience. It's an essential God-given and American right, the pursuit of happiness. This is not only extremely important to every Utah, as the violent history of this state knows a thing or two about religious persecution, but it's also very important to the Hispanic and Latino community. we hold our religious beliefs very dear to our heart. We are taught by our parents at a very young age to recognize the hand of God in all things, and to seek His guiding inspiration through prayer in everything we do. Understanding that the right of religious freedom was under attack, I drafted a resolution urging all of our elected officials to pursue legislative and administrative policies which would further protect and preserve religious freedom in Utah as well as in the rest of the country. Recognizing that this fundamental right to our society is protected under U.S. and Utah Constitution, respectively. This resolution was first introduced at the Utah County Republican Party, later on at the Utah Republican State Central Committee, where it passed with overwhelming support. Following its passage, this resolution was given to all elected officials. Within a few months, 5 to be precise, Senator Lee introduced in the U.S. Congress the First Amendment Defense Act, also known as FADA. In a speech given by Senator Lee on June 11, 2015, titled Conserving Religious Liberty for All, he eloquently stated, and I quote, "No matter who you are or where you come from, regardless of your race or wealth, your political affiliation or sexual orientation, to be free in America is to know you won't be forced to compromise your conscience as a price of your citizenship." End of quote. For the last several years, Senator Lee has been the champion of religious freedom in the U.S. Senate, has motivated members of Congress to pursue avenues to protect these freedoms, has inspired Americans across the nation to support this fundamental right, and has also inspired other nations to follow his leadership. For these reasons and more, as chairman of the Utah Republican Latino Coalition, it is an honor for me to present to United States Senator Mike Lee the Utah Republican Latino Coalition Defender of Religious Freedom Award.
Fantastic, I get to talk again. Arturo, I'm so grateful for your words. Yeah, religious freedom is very important to me, and it always has been. It's a hallmark characteristic of any society, the protection, freedom. You can't have a free people unless you will allow their soul to be free. And I don't think there's anyone here who hasn't seen religious oppression in one form or another. If we haven't experienced it ourselves, we've at least become aware of it through someone to whom we're related. In many instances, many of us who haven't experienced it ourselves are the direct descendants of people who in past centuries experienced it, and that's one of the things that brought many of our ancestors to this valley to begin with, was religious oppression. Religious oppression is something that is never overcome completely. As long as the human condition exists and human beings run government rather than angels governing us, that has to be fought every single day. And those who would call religious oppression and religious discrimination from government extinct are denying something very, very evil, and should be viewed with suspicion. This very year, I've seen multiple attempts to undermine religious freedom, to attack it, and to my great horror, just a few years ago, talking about the need to protect religious freedom legislatively, was always praised. Within the last 3 or 4 years, it has become controversial in some circles. So people will say you're raising a controversial topic if you, even in the abstract, raise the need to protect religious freedom. We've got to watch out for this because it's never far from us. So thanks again for the award. I cannot thank you.
we're gonna have her after. Noah Wall is an Executive Vice President at FreedomWorks. He has a position for grassroots activism and his extensive experience working with political campaigns and promoting principles of limited governance. Noah is an expert at creating and implementing dynamic advocacy strategies to engage a nationwide community. He graduated with a BA in International Affairs from George Washington University, and he resides in Fairfax Station. I'm sorry, getting a lot of reason. With his wife and child. We welcome Mr. Wall. Thank you.
All right, so I am a grassroots guy, and I do know how hard it is to organize crowds, fill rooms, and so I always want to make sure proper appreciation is put together for the organizers of events. And so, if we could, I just want to always do a round of applause, the people who made tonight possible, and in particular Arturo Morales, who I'm just so grateful for all of the work that you've done over the years. And so, thank you, Arturo, and thank you for everyone who put this together. I wanted to speak very briefly tonight about a friend. Not here tonight to talk to you about elections. I promise Arturo I won't talk about elections. I'm not going to talk about the midterms. I'm not even going to talk about Utah's senator. What I am going to talk about is a dear friend who I believe needs everyone here's help. And I think that I'd like to do tonight is make sure that we all just remember that. The American dream is so incredibly special, but it doesn't fight for itself. It takes people like this in this room, rooms like this around the country, working day in and day out to fight for that American dream. It requires commitment, it requires sacrifice, and it requires that we all passionately defend each other when we're most in need. A particular friend I'm thinking about tonight is a friend you can always rely on. It's that type of friend who's such a good friend, who gives so freely of their time, of their passion, sacrifices so much, that you forget that they need help too. That's the type of person that you never actually know that they need help until you just happen to notice it. That you always know that that person's a true friend. How many of you here tonight know of a friend like that? Anyone? I think I know of a few. I think I know one in particular in this room. I think we need to make sure that we remember. This particular person goes to Washington, D.C. and has for the last 12 years. Leaves his family every week to go to Washington to fight for individual liberty, fight for religious freedom, and fight for the American dream. And that very passionate commitment that he made to all of you is specifically why he needs our help now, because the swamp does not like that. The swamp does not like these individual liberty fighting heroes that we have, very few of them in Washington. And so, all I want to say right now is just make sure you remember your friends. And remember people who fight for the American dream, even when it's unpopular. Thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do here. And let's have a great evening.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to read bio for our panelists tonight. We have Janae Stracke. Janae Stracke is the director of Grassroots for Heritage Action. She leads the Seinfeld program and Heritage Action of 2 million grassroots activists. She formerly worked for concerned woman of the American National Field Direction and Communications Coordinator. She attended Liberty University and received a degree in broadcast journalism with a double minor in public relations and psychology. Garrett Bess. Garrett is the Vice President of Heritage in Action. He is responsible for managing the government relations, communications, digital and grassroots teams. He can search for nearly a decade and still in the field of a senior staff member to members of the Congress, and he's a native from Tampa Bay, Florida. Sean Reyes. Sean Reyes is Utah 21st Attorney General. He is the son of Spanish-Filipino immigrant father and a Japanese-Hawaiian mother. In 2020, he was recognized with the White House Award of Commendation for his work defending children, veterans, and Americans from numerous threats. He's a worldwide expert on technology, innovation, and regulation. Reyes graduated summa cum laude from the Brigham Young University in Provo and earned his law degree with honors from LIC Berkeley while playing varsity volleyball for the Cal Golden Bears. General Reyes and his wife for 26 years, Selena, are proud to be in Utah and living with his children. So, with us, our friend, Sean Reyes.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Mayra said I could have a minute or two to explain why I look so sloppy in front of you. No disrespect intended. I just traveled 18 hours and I just got off the plane. They rushed me from the airport directly here because I so wanted to be here to thank you for supporting my community, the Latino community, and for participating in the panel. But many of you know that we do a lot of work overseas in the last 3 days. Apologize again. I haven't slept for 2 days, 3 nights, and left my team in the middle of a rescue there. And I would never do that. Would only do that for very few things. And so I'm excited to be on the panel. Daniela and I have spoken all over the place in DC on panels everywhere, and that'll be great. I think it's important to talk about the Hispanic Latino community, but I wouldn't have flown all that way if it were just the panel. They promised me that I could talk about for a minute somebody that I've known for decades since we were undergraduates together. I know I'm not allowed to talk about elections, so I won't. Just like Noah said, we're not talking about midterms, but I'm talking about someone who doesn't get enough credit for the work that they've done to lift and inspire our Latino community. And if I could, for just a moment, tell you a few things that over the last many years have really helped us. Even our Hispanic community doesn't fully understand. This is my co-chair of the Utah Opioid Task Force, who used his influence in DC and in Utah to help us battle the #1 killer for many age demographics in Utah that disproportionately impacted our community, not just in passing policy, but in making sure that we held people accountable and that we got resources for recovery for so many. This is a person who really championed and led nationally the Criminal Justice Reform First Step Act that also helped liberate many of our people who are disproportionately impacted by a justice system that sometimes isn't as colorblind as it should be. This is a person who has helped us, since I've been in office, rescue and rehabilitate and heal men, women, and children from the horrors of human trafficking. And if you'll indulge me for a moment of a story, in 2020, many of you know my good friend Tim Ballard from Operation Underground Railroad. Many of you have supported us. There are others in that fight too. In 2020, there were more than a dozen women from Venezuela that we found. They had gone to the Dominican Republic for economic opportunity, had been roofied and taken and sold into sex slavery for 2 years. We liberated them out of Haiti in a miraculous rescue, thanks to President Donald Trump at the time, Ivanka Trump, Robert O'Brien, who was the National Security Advisor, Heather Fisher, and one senior senator from the great state of Utah who stood with us and pulled miracle after miracle to be able to get these women free from the clutches of those traffickers. And on their first day of freedom, their very first day, not being raped over and over and over again for many years. They landed in Dulles Airport, we greeted them there, and we took them to the White House, we took them to Congress to meet with representatives. And there were many in Congress who didn't have time to meet with them. There was one who not only had time, but he said, you know what, there's going to be too many issues with security trying to get them. They don't even have passports or visas. We literally just got them off the plane with humanitarian visas. I'll come down to the street and meet them. And this senior senator came down with compassion and caring, spoke to them, spoke to us in our language in Spanish, prayed with them, welcomed them to the United States, and they were ecstatic and they were elated. So beyond the importance of the policy, and beyond the importance of the work and the representation, is the character and the integrity of the human being behind that representation. And I could go on and on and on. There are many more things that have helped and lifted our Hispanic community. These are non-partisan issues. Criminal justice reform, human trafficking, the opioid epidemic, suicide, mental behavioral health issues. All of these things, we could not be leading the charge in the state of Utah without support of our senior senator. So I love him. He's a lawyer, which means I love him more because we have to stick together. And as a lawyer who's practiced in all the courts in the United States and understands a little bit of the Constitution, is someone that I have admired, again, from our younger days. Hopefully we're still kind of young, but I know we're not exactly. Senator Mike Lee, God bless you, Mike. Thank you for what you've done for our community. And I would recognize others from the Republican Party, from the Democrat Party, who've done similar things to help us, but you're here, and I didn't want to miss that opportunity, so I'll go up now and let Danielle and the rest of Noah start on the panel, but this is literally, we cleaned the tattoos off. I don't normally have cornrows and a bandana. Yeah, wait till I do the Fox interview later. But Mayra, thank you. Heidi, everyone who invited me to participate, and Pluto and all the rest. God bless you in your work. We're very proud of you. Keep it up. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. I know the evening is slipping away from us real fast here, so we're going to do a sort of a shotgun questions and answers on some of the priority policy positions that Americans across the country are contending with, but especially here in Utah. And one right out of the box, you know, we know that inflation is obviously a big deal. We've done these true cost events across the country. I was just in Miami with Congresswoman Maria Dina Salazar in a supermarket, and you know, talking to señoras, you know, cubanas, you know, who are on fixed incomes, who are barely making it from week to week, who are scraping their knees in prayer, hoping that they'll make it from one week to the next, because gas is so high, food is so high, rent is so high, medicine, everything, right? And so the first question I'll throw out, and we'll start out with General Reyes here real quick. Inflation is costing the average Utah family $910 per month, and it is hitting those on lower and fixed incomes the hardest. I was just with Congresswoman Mayra, Flores, you know, close to my district, and we had another event, a lot of ladies who came, because we gave them a $100 certificate to show how much it was costing them from 1 week to the next, in comparison to the first day that Biden took office. And some of them crying when they got the coupons because they were barely making it. General, there's some point to the war in Ukraine and greedy companies. What's caused this to happen, and what solutions are there to fix it? And Senator, you're on cue next for this one.
Yeah, I'm going to kick it over to the senator right away. He's that good on his feet while I try to fix this. They came to hear from me.
Yeah, so I think my mic's working. Can you hear me okay? The very first thing we've got to do is recognize what causes inflation, and this is where it's a beautifully simplistic answer, and that is the truth. Milton Friedman, the famed Nobel Prize laureate economist, was asked the same question back in the late 1970s when we were going through a similar period of dramatic inflation. Somebody asked him while he was speaking at a university somewhere in the Midwest, what is it that's causing this? Is it speculative investing? Is it international trade practices? Is it labor unions? And he said, no, you're overcomplicating this. We're in the United States of America, and in the United States of America, inflation has one cause: Congress spending too much money. That's it. So if we want it to stop, we have to spend less money. Once it kicks in, it's a little harder to turn around. And the Federal Reserve will tell you, as I told you in the past, that when inflation gets that bad, you've got to raise interest rates to at or above the level of inflation, which is incredibly painful. I do think there are other ways that we could bring it down that wouldn't necessarily require that, or at least for a prolonged period of time. One would be reducing federal regulations. The federal regulatory burden was something that we found a way to truncate during COVID for health reasons. We could do it then. Why not now for an inflationary emergency? Why do we need an economy that's saddled with $2 or $3 trillion a year in added regulatory burden? Of course, we don't. We're not safer. We're not healthier because of most of those regulations. We could do a whole lot better. We'd have more economic growth. We could overcome that inflation a lot faster. But here's the thing. We've got a president who only wants more cowbell. He came in, we brought in record revenue last year, over $4 trillion. $4 trillion, that's more than the entire federal government cost, soup to nuts. Social Security and Medicare to defense and everything in between just a few years ago. So if we had brought in that much revenue just a few years ago, the budget would be balanced, we'd be paying off our national debt instead of adding to it. But instead, we spent almost $7 trillion. Because Joe Biden has a rubber-stamped Democratic Congress that will do anything he wants. And this is sad. You were right, Danielle. A couple months ago, it was $910, $911 a month in Utah, the most of any state in the union. Today, and I know this because my team that provides this to the Joint Economic Committee Republicans, today, $949 a month. That's what the average Utah family shells out in increased household expenses relative to the day Joe Biden took office. So what we need, frankly, is a Republican Senate and a Republican House, and stop the darn spending.
Because I think Mike articulated very well many of the causes of inflation. He alluded to this too. Even if the Biden administration can't get something passed through Congress, they utilize executive orders over and over and over again. They expand the administrative state so that each agency is creating their own administrative rules. And that in and of itself is a cost. State Republican AGs, we have filed last year over 50 lawsuits just against the Biden administration to try to slow down, try to stop them in their tracks, because we knew that this was coming, and now we're seeing the fruits of that. Let me also just mention one other thing that exacerbates the inflationary problems that we see, and that's ESG, right? So environmental, social governance. These are, again, these are creations when they can't beat us on policy, when they can't beat us at the State House, when they can't beat us in elections, they resort then to things like ESG. leveraging investments with our own money against us in the trillions, bypassing the congressional prerogative. It's a very dangerous precedent. And I don't care if it's liberal issues that they're pushing today. I wouldn't want someone pushing conservative issues on me without me. It's a form of taking away our liberty. I can go on. I think Fox is printing an op-ed that I penned on ESG this week or next week. Please, if you don't know about it, that is something, again, in the United States, as we're suffering from this inflationary beast that we're having to contend with as well.
Terrific. No, we'll certainly look out for it. The Heritage Action, I know, has been holding events across the country and campaigns on the spending that's going on. Janae, maybe you can speak to this. What are American people saying about what's going on?
Yeah, so we have a network of grassroots all across the country, and just like this event here that Arturo has helped put together, we'll host events like this all across the country. We're very issue-based, so we did a tour called Save Our Paychecks that was all about spending and inflation. It's certainly not a new issue. We hosted events on the education issue. We've hosted ESG events. There are a number of issues that we're traveling around and hosting these events on for a variety of reasons. One, information is power, knowledge is power. So the more you know about this, even if you know it's an issue, the more you can talk about it with your friends and family. We're all about getting resources and information out to you, whether it's through our weekly call or an event. Now, the other thing, aside from information, is just the energy that can bring. I was in Atlanta earlier this week, I think. I've been hopping around states from states. It's all a blur. We were hosting our weekly call there called Sentinel Strategy Call. And it was brought up the different polling numbers and how that can sway people's opinion on something, and the psyche behind that just the optimism behind something can actually have power and sway. So I think it's so important not only to have these events, to talk about the issues, know the information, but to know that you're not alone. Because corporate media wants you to think that you're the only person that thinks the way you think. The only ones that are upset about gas prices, or the only ones upset about inflation, and that there's, that it's Russia's fault, that there's not actually an easy solution. They're really good at pointing the finger, but they want you to think that you're alone, and coming together can bring energy to what you're doing, but not just what you're doing, to everyone around you. So that the psyche behind it, that your neighbor goes, oh wow, they think that too. Oh wow, they're gonna go vote. It brings an energy to it. So I would encourage and encourage all of you to continue doing that.
Thank you. Garrett, the Inflation Reduction Act sounds like a great bill. Congress passed it this year. Did it reduce inflation, and how is it impacting Utah families?
Yeah, of course. I mean, they named it that, so it did. That's how it works. First, also, too, I'm really glad. I don't speak Spanish, but I was curious. I didn't know if maybe this whole panel was going to be Spanish. But I'm grateful you were talking about growing up picking grapes and stuff. I grew up picking tomatoes and corn and all that type of stuff. And one year, the migrant workers that came through to help us in the fields that summer, there was a young woman that I was spitting over. I would have chopped off my right arm to speak Spanish. The language barrier, Nash, chopped off your right arm. Never been no more picking for me. So anyway, the Inflation Reduction Act. Somebody asked President Biden the other day, when is it going to actually start reducing inflation? They couldn't actually answer the question because inflation has continued to go up even since the bill was passed. Even some of New York City's Wall Street investment firms have started to acknowledge that what the senator just said, that federal spending is actually what is driving inflation. There's really only one solution, and that's to stop spending. I think the strategy moving forward is that DC often tries to lock in a baseline spending once they've achieved it. So we're going to have a lot of work to do when Senator Lee is in the majority this coming year to actually pull that baseline back down to where it should be. That's going to be the real hard work because DC is predisposed to spend your money and to spend more of it next year. And we gotta get that baseline back down.
Thank you. Senator, if you can take that on as well, and then add to it a little bit on this insane war on energy. This country needs energy abundance, but this administration is keeping that from happening. So if you could tackle a little bit on the Inflation Reduction Act and then move over to the war on energy and speak on that.
As for the Inflation Reduction Act, it's a common theme. It's been touched on briefly, but people name bills something cute, something nice. And if you vote against that thing, you're the devil. And that's how they try to get people to vote for it. It was bad, spent more money, and didn't really do anything to control spending. What it did contain was price controls. We know how that works out. It ends up harming the very low-income people that it's designed to help because it creates scarcity. As to the secondary question was
War on energy.
war on energy, yeah. It's really sad because we were in a great position. We had achieved North American energy independence by the end of the last administration. And because of that, our economy was good. Our people had access to clean, efficient, abundant, and affordable sources of power, both for electric power and to power their vehicles. And now we don't have those things. We don't have them because our current administration is pursuing vain ambitions that don't perform. And what they do is they empower our adversaries. Look at Vladimir Putin. He would never have invaded Ukraine if we were exporting significant quantities of natural gas in the form of LNG. Would never have happened in Crimea in 2014. Would never have happened this year in the Donbass and other parts of Ukraine. Because this is what's fueling Vladimir Putin. He would never have the economic, political, military strength to do any of this. If we were producing and exporting more energy, with suicide, we've got to stop it.
Thank you so much. So during the COVID pandemic, there was a quick shutdown of our schools here in Utah as well. A lot of them transitioned over to online learning, and we just have received these test results that were made public, which shows that students are now woefully behind in their educational progress, which leads to, of course, begs the need for options for education for our children. I'm just going to toss it out there. What are some of those solutions to make up what we've lost in this short period of time?
Vouchers. You let parents decide where to send their kids to school. That's it, vouchers.
Yeah, school choice, education, universal education savings accounts is really the key to this. Create some competition, just like you would in any other market. We need public schools too. I personally grew up in rural part of Iowa and started out in our public school. And when I say rural, my public school class was about 35 students. That was our public school. I didn't have private schools nearby that I could go to, not that my parents would have been able to afford it anyway. But I started out in public school, and then an incident happened with a high school boy and a kindergarten boy. And the mom of the kindergarten boy didn't find out about it until the next day when the sheriff was knocking on her door. The school had sent him home and said, "Don't tell your mom." Why? Because they were lawyering up and trying to cover their own butts. So of course my parents and other parents were rightfully upset and went to the school board meeting and asked them, what will you do different next time? Guess what they said? Nothing. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. This is not a new issue that the administrative side, they're protecting the system. They're not protecting the students. It's not a new issue, but there's a new opportunity right now. And in COVID, that was the silver lining, right? Parents started waking up, and this is a neutralizing issue that even if there are parents who don't agree with my parents' values or my values, they do agree that they're in charge of their child. They're not co-parenting with the government. They make the decisions for the kids. And when we have politicians and systems saying, no, we make those decisions, parents everywhere have woken up, and there is a wave across this country that are fighting for their children, that are fighting for options. My parents, that's right. My parents pulled me out to homeschool me because of that, because of the incident that happened. And parents, I've seen that happen with parents everywhere right now. The CRT, the gender dysmorphia movement that's going on through schools. There's a number of issues that parents are saying, no, I'm gonna pull my kid out, and they need options, and they need the resources to do so because they're the best advocates for their kids.
Amen. Let me follow on just on that vein, because I believe absolutely that's true. COVID was just an excuse, a cover to be able to divest from parents power, from local districts, but we have to, as a Hispanic community, Latino community, those of you who support us, do our homework, be educated, and be active, and make sure that we elect at the most local level, school board members, city council members, all the way up to United States senators who will stand up for families to be able to push back against the federal government that has taken it upon themselves, again, whether it's through the Department of Education to tell us how to educate our children, the Department of Justice to tell parents who are rightfully concerned about CRT or about library porn that they're domestic terrorists. It takes courage to do that. It is not easy because you get canceled. How do I know? Because it happens to us every single day that we talk about it. And your neighbors stop talking to you, and your kids go to school and they get harassed and even bullied and all of those things. But we need people, including those on this stage down on the other side, who will continue to stand up for parents and local control, local power. I think you're very impressive. I think look at Glenn Youngkin and what he did, harnessing that parental angst in Virginia, and we can replicate that here.
And hopefully the public schools then, I started by saying we need competition, right? Because I would encourage parents that have values different than what the left has right now to homeschool your kids if you can. If you don't indoctrinate them, someone else will. I would encourage that, but a lot of parents are not able to do that. There's a lot of single parents that aren't able to do that. We need the public school system, and we have to hold them accountable, run for school board, be the ones that are making the decisions, have those choices, and hopefully they'll read the writing on the wall and clean up.
Senator Lee, as we centralize more power and money and control in Washington, D.C., there is a proportionate diminishment of power and money and control to the individual. It just seems that Washington is a regulation-making machine. How do we rein it in? It is now, of course, imposing its will and usurping the role of family, of church, of the market. And every law, every statute, every rule, every mandate that is passed is meant to control our behavior. Politicians have too much control.
Sharon and I had a saying when we were raising our 3 children. If our kids started doing something they weren't supposed to do, usually it was because they weren't doing the things they were supposed to do. And we would make them do more of the stuff they were supposed to do. So, obviously that meant go read the Constitution 10 more times. The federal government has a few jobs. Fight wars, Army and the Navy, regulate trade between the states and the foreign nations, control the border. There are a few others, but that's about it. We've been doing so many things that we have no business doing. We've gotten really bad at doing the things that only we can do. That's why our border's a mess. That's why the Bush withdrawal from Afghanistan. If the president weren't so fixated on micromanaging your life and making you choose between your ability to earn a living and forcing you to succumb to an unwanted medical procedure that might violate your religious liberty, perhaps the Bush withdrawal of Afghanistan wouldn't happen. Maybe we wouldn't be having drug cartels making billions of dollars, bringing people into our country illegally. So we've got to keep the federal government focused on the things that only it can do. And I mean that quite literally. Get the federal government out altogether of the regulation of intrastate labor, manufacturing, agriculture, mining, health, safety, welfare, except insofar as it pertains directly to one of the 18 enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8. The best way to get us there to begin with, because it's a huge undertaking, we generate 100,000 pages of new regulations, each of which is a legally binding law in its own right. Constitutionally problematic, but it has the effect of a binding law. To pass something called the Reyes Act. That's why I love the way you phrase the question. The answer is built into the question. The Reyes Act. We passed the Reyes Act, and all of a sudden Congress has to approve every one of those, to pass them as a law, or else they can't take effect. It'd be beautiful. It would complete the circle. It would be so awesome. It would be like if Donald Trump all of a sudden learned how to present his border security message in Spanish instead of "we have a wall, it's going to be good, it's going to be good." It's the magic.
Necesitamos un muro. Un muro bien alto y dorado, magnífico.
It works.
How do you impress upon Americans the urgency of overregulation? What kind of campaign efforts do we do here?
Yes, excuse me, it's a good question. I mean, Janae talked about the way our organization is. I know that Libre and others are similar, and that is, actually I'm going to call it a thread that Janae already said, and that is a lot of times as conservatives, we may feel a little isolated, or we may feel like there's not an entire country out there that views the events the way that we view them, and it's just simply not true. I was actually to speak to a group in Queens, New York, a couple weeks ago, and I didn't know what to expect. And so I go to Queens. It's an American Legion Hall. 250 people were there on this like Thursday night, and as I spoke, I realized that I needed to get further right in my terminology. And the further right I got, the worse, or the more that I realized I needed to go further. And I tell you that because that's New York City. That's the heart of New York City. They're experiencing the effects of liberal rule. The modern sort of liberal mindset is disorder. What they do disorders things, and people suffer when things are disordered. And going back to the question about regulation, government, like Senator Lee just said, government wasn't designed to regulate every aspect of your life. And while it comes in the effect of a law or a regulation, it's actually disordering the normal process by which we're supposed to live. And so, you know, part of it is education. So like Libre and FreedomWorks and Heritage Action, there's an education component because our school system has faltered so poorly in these areas that there's so many Americans that they don't like the impacts, but they don't understand what is causing those things. And so we have a huge education role to play. And then stitching together communities of people that see things the way that we see them. That's a huge effort. At the root of our system of government is representative. We will eventually get a government that represents us if we stay steady, if we stay true, and we keep voting for people that represent the world the way that we see it. And so it takes determination in that realm as well.
General Reyes, your office must be inundated with proposals to dictate and rule. And one of the worst abuses that I saw during the COVID situation was what they did to churches. For example, they shut them down and arrested pastors. How does your office do it?
We use every tool in our arsenal, whether that's intervening as a party and litigating against the federal government, banding together with other states to file comments on proposed regulation, sending letters, support, filing friend of the court briefs, amicus briefs, and it is a non-stop job. Something that was just said, that I think it struck me. Liberals, our friends of the left, often take a position of moral relativism, which is to say there is no absolute truth when it comes to, that's why life can be defined sort of however they want, and gender is so fluid and everything changes. Well, they take that same approach to the rule of law, and to them, again, we can have all of the laws in the world, we can have, as Senator said earlier, but without people who will stand up and protect those and defend those, whether it's at the border, whether it's military, whether it's law enforcement, the rule of law, it just really struck me that, again, that they, their moral relativism bleeds over into their approach, not just in social issues, but even how they approach authority. Hence, we have 9 billion lethal doses of fentanyl and human trafficking flowing over and all of these things. And so because of their sort of falling asleep wheel, because of policies, whether from Biden or Mayorkas or others, we feel compelled in representing our constituents, the people of Utah, to keep filing these lawsuits over and over and over again. It's the only tool that we have to be able to push back against this constant refrain of regulatory overreach.
The last question, the night has totally slipped away. For the senator, he talks about Mayorkas, who's doing a bang-up job at the border. The prospects of any kind of solution for the 2 million dreamers that we have here, the 600 or so folks under DACA, get some kind of permanent status that is going to be necessary at some point. What are the possibilities in a divided government that occurring that we haven't been able to achieve when the Democrats have the majorities of the House, the Senate, and now the White House?
I don't think I know a single member of the Senate or the House, Republican or Democrat, who would look at DACA beneficiaries and specifically those people who were brought here as infants by no choice of their own, and remain in illegal status based on a decision they didn't make. I don't know anyone in Congress of any political stripe would say, yeah, ran them all off the board. Not physically possible, not moral. It's not. It wouldn't be good policy, and it just would never happen. So we do need to figure out what to do about them. Putting them in a legal status is going to require a bona fide compromise, not a compromise of the sort conceived of by the left, where the left dreams up some crackpot leftist scheme, and then 10 Republicans in the Senate join with them and call that bipartisanship. When in fact, that's collusion. What we need is something to accompany that actually secures the border. We were close to reaching such a point at the end of the last administration. We had a secure southern border for the first time in my adult lifetime. And it's always been the condition present, the bright line that I've found, as the one condition that absolutely has to be in place before something like that has to be achieved. Now, Biden's messed that up something awful. It's going to take a lot to correct that. It's theoretically possible we could get there. Imagine, for instance, we got President Biden to agree to sign a piece of legislation that would completely rework the asylum standards. Rework them so that they would create essentially a Remain in Mexico program built into the asylum process, where you apply for asylum. If you're crossing by land for a southern border, you apply for asylum outside the United States. You remain in Mexico or some third country until such time as your asylum application has been either granted or denied. If you were to do that and accompany that with a bill conferring some type of legal status on dreamers, that might work. I don't know whether Joe Biden would have the good sense to sign such a thing, but America, I think, would be better off if we did.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna interrupt because I feel the need to say these last two things. Everything that's talked about up here, there's a number of issues we talked about, there's a number of issues we didn't talk about. But every single one of us is feeling the personal effects of that, because they're not just policies or talking points, it's impacting our lives, it's real. And we can talk about how to hold Congress accountable or what the government should or shouldn't be doing, but we all have a role to play in that as well. You and I, all of us, American citizens across the country, have a role to play. So one, who in here has a plan to vote? Have you made a plan? Great. If you haven't made a plan, make a plan, because the day comes and something happens at work and your kid's late for school, or you've been forgotten about the project they need to do, or your washer and dryer stop working, fill in the blank. So make a plan, make a plan, and then talk to your like-minded friends and families and neighbors and offer to babysit, offer to drive them, do whatever you can to help them. And then the second thing is that it doesn't stop with the ballot box. It doesn't stop in November. We have to stay engaged. So Heritage Action is hosting a premier grassroots event in Fort Worth, November 10th through 12th, right after the election. It's going to be a great party. You can come, everyone's invited. And this is where we dive into these issues that we talked about. What's next? What to expect from the 118th Congress? How can you get involved to help see these through, both at the state level and at the federal level? That's the next step. We have to stay engaged. It's not just the government, it's not just our elected officials, it's us as well. So please join us.
Thank you. That's good submission. In closing, I would say this. For those of us who have been in politics for a long time and looking at guys like Michael Clara for the last 25 years, we would often say, you know, our liberal friends too often exploit, they use the Hispanic community. But far too often, the Republican Party ignores the Hispanic community, and very often, the Hispanic community would rather be used than ignored, because at least they feel like they have a semblance of a seat at the table and influence. So it's incumbent on us, for those of us who are Republicans, to not be exploitive, but to message and understand the Hispanic community in a way. Look, everybody has a perception that immigration is our #1 issue. Not true. It's the same issues as everyone else. It's economy, it's family, it's jobs, it's education. And simply translating commercials into Spanish is not real Spanish outreach. It's getting out, rolling up our sleeve, doing the things that Senator Lee has done over the last number of years, getting into the community and serving. If you serve the community, the walls of distrust will come down, and then they will realize that our values are their values, and they will come out and vote. If you do that, simply to sign them up to vote, they'll understand that it's not as sincere. So my plea for all of you, there's a reason why in Florida the Hispanic numbers are going down. Governor DeSantis stood up for families, stood up for values, and now those numbers are skyrocketing back again. If we have leadership who will focus on that, the Hispanic numbers will come. Thanks, Governor.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing real quickly, and that is I work in Washington, D.C. I'm not from Utah. I don't live here. But I can tell you one thing. There's a lot of people that their member of Congress, their senator, gets to D.C. and is a different person. And Senator Lee is not one of those people. He is the exact same person in D.C. that we work with day in and day out, defending the values of people from Utah, and you can trust him in D.C. There are people like me and Janae that live in an area where our federal representatives don't adhere to the values that we care about. We need people from Utah to send people like Senator Lee to D.C. because we don't get the representation that we want in our states. And so thank y'all for supporting him for all these years. Don't trade it in for a different model. You got the best model already. Okay? So, thank you.
All right, we'll pass it on.
Thank you. As you may have noticed, we're a little over time, so I know we promised a photo opportunity, and since we might not have time to do everyone, anyone who would like, now's the time for you to come up here and we do a big group selfie. So get your camera, we're standing up here, we'll have you stay right up there, and we're gonna do it. So now we want a selfie, everyone come up here. This is your chance to get the photo with all the panelists. And while you're gathered, please make it quick, because I know that they've got places to go. But we want to thank you each for coming out tonight. Keep on coming, I'll keep talking, but keep on coming. We want to thank Libre for putting this event on. We want to thank the Utah Republican Latino Coalition, the Alianza Venezolana de Utah, FreedomWorks, and the Heritage Action of America. Thank you to our panelists and speakers, Noah Wall, Garrett, Bess, Janae, Stracke, Reyes, Daniel, Garza, and Mike Lee. Keep coming. Everyone keep coming.